I gotta say, I still love that intro music. It makes me so excited for our next episode of Unsung Heroes of the Cloud, where today it's just Mike and me. And Mike today will walk us through Azure DevOps starters in Azure. But before we jump in, Mike, how are you doing?
I'm good. Just still recovering from the storm. I mean, my fences blew away, so that's fun. The chickens of the neighbor, they really love my yards now. She has a couple of chickens, and they're just wandering around now in my garden. So they kind of are open to that new territory. But luckily, everything is now on the fixing side, so we don't have to wait that long to get everything fixed. But yeah, it was quite the weather this weekend here in Belgium, I must say. It's
I
luckily you weren't impacted that way in San Francisco.
No, here it was just it's starting to get cold, and talking about the weather as good Belgian people do, we finally got some rain again yesterday. And I know it sounds strange to some people, but every time it rains here, I am so happy.
Okay, you have to move back to Belgium then, man. We this is the first Sunday in like 4 weeks, and tomorrow it will probably go back to rain. So so be happy that you have that much sun, because the dark days are really here in Belgium.
Well,
But we, we just got to learn to live with it, I think.
I'll give you the winters here feel that much more energizing because you don't have that dark, gloomy feeling continuously, and it just the sun is shining, and even though it might be cold outside, and looking outside, I actually see some frost, so it might even have frozen overnight. But just having natural sunlight helps you so much in staying energized.
Yeah, of course, vitamin D is it's healthy for you, right? That's
Yes.
the thing. That's
And
what you get with solar light.
talking about vitamin D, why don't we talk about some vitamin DevOps?
Yes, that's this is one unsung hero which we haven't really talked about. Of course, elsewhere it would be on the show. Although April mentioned it once during her session with the Azure Static Web Apps, and the thing is, everybody talks about DevOps, and everybody is doing DevOps or claiming they're doing DevOps.
Mhm.
Or at least doing CI/CD pipelines, because DevOps, is a cultural thing. It's not really like a tooling or anything. And but some people are really scared of that, right?
Mhm.
And they have no easy ramp up or no easy step into that process, because they don't know where to start, even though the documentation of most of the tools that I know is quite good. Whether you look at GitHub Actions, whether you're looking at Azure DevOps or any other tools, um, typically they have some good documentation, but still people, specifically IT people, they just want to go ahead and jump in, and they don't read, right? At least I don't. I think that's a claim that everybody can make in IT. And for that, the Azure teams made it easy for us, and they created a service called Azure DevOps Starter, which is a simple way of getting started. What's in the name, of getting started with DevOps. And you even get some additional bonus features on top of that, which is really, really cool. So
And
let me, yeah.
the things that it provisions, does it just provision Azure DevOps pipelines, or can it also do things in GitHub Actions?
That's the beauty of it. It works now for both offerings that we have. I mean, Microsoft has both Azure DevOps and GitHub, of course. And the cool thing is you can just even start off with your own code in Azure DevOps pipelines, which is hosted in GitHub. So you can actually have a combination of both too. So you have GitHub Actions separately or full GitHub. You have Azure DevOps or the combination with an existing GitHub repo if you want to. So
Cool.
that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So maybe just dive in. How do you get started? Well, it's pretty easy. You just go to the search bar, which you start off with everything. You just type in DevOps and you will see that there is this one little icon here called DevOps Starter. So if you take a look here, that's right over here. If I click on that, you will get a like in anything else, a DevOps Starter list if you already have some projects already there. But for now, I'm just going to start off with a clean slate. Let's go from there, and I'm just going to create a new one.
And looking at your view, you've created quite a few DevOps starters already. So you use this
Yes,
frequently?
I don't use this frequently. I use this either to quickly set up demos, because that's the easiest part. But the beauty of it all is that you can also just set something up, replace the code by default, and just go with your own projects afterwards. And you have everything, and you have an additional dashboard, which I'm going to demonstrate in a second. Now, the beauty of DevOps Starter is that you first start with the choice that you need to make. Where do you want to start, with GitHub or with Azure DevOps? Now, that change is not really obvious in this window. It's this little small here link that you have, where you can change going from GitHub to Azure DevOps. In the past, it was Azure DevOps by default. Today, it's GitHub by default that we're going to start with.
And
so
that makes sense.
kind of makes sense. So what you can have is, and the biggest difference is actually if you switch between the two, is you have GitHub. Let me just click that. You have GitHub, and you see all the different language choices that you have, or technology choices that you have. If I change here to Azure DevOps and I do done, you will see that actually an additional type of project is being added using C, or even bring your own code, starting with your own application. So if you already have a repository somewhere that you're hosting, which is Git based, you can immediately hook this up into Azure DevOps Starter. Okay, so just for the fun of it, I'm going to start off with something simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself here, let's say, a static website, and go for some static code. And then I'm going to decide on the framework that I'm going to use. So if I'm going to click on next, what it will now do is it will take, it's a static website. I'm going to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. What kind of service do you want to run this on? And this is depending on the languages that you've chosen or the technology choices that you made. Okay? So for static websites, we have Windows web app services or web app for containers by default. Now, the cool thing is, and let me go back, if you select any of these other languages, and I selected Azure DevOps. If you select any of these other languages, you get different choices. Like, for instance, if I go for .NET, and I click Next, and I go here for ASP.NET Core, for instance, I can even, and that's an addition that you have in DevOps Starts with Azure DevOps integration. You can even add a database immediately. So if you want to set up some CMS system or just some simple application, you can actually really do that. But if I now click next on the service, you will actually see that there's a lot of more choices. You range from Kubernetes to Service Fabric cluster, still a lovely service, up into even some old school virtual machines. Now, friends, don't let friends deploy on virtual machines. We want to have scalability, but you can do that if you want to, because if you still have a monolith or you need to deploy some monolithic code, you can actually do that. Also, depending on the different sub frameworks that you have, if I go now for ASP.NET, you will see that some things will change here again, because now I don't have Kubernetes anymore, because it's full framework, doesn't support on Kubernetes unless you would be running Windows containers, but that's not out of the box available. But you see there's other choices there, like function apps and so on and so on. So you do have a choice here on the environment that you want to run. So if I want to go with ASP.NET, here, for instance, I can say go for Kubernetes. Let's go for the most complex scenario. And now I can say I'm going to give it a project name. Now this will start off with a blank project. So this will
Mhm.
create a new project under an Azure DevOps organization. You can choose the organization. You can even create a new organization from here. I'll show you in a second. So you just need a project name where you want to land this. So let's say that I'm going to use this Unsung DevOps cube. I'm going to push this into this environment. Let's say where I push everything in. It's a garbage bin, so I can do whatever I want. I have this Azure DevOps organization. It's on this Azure subscription that I want to run. You want to create a new or use an existing cluster. So I can just decide on what kind of an AKS cluster I want to build up. And this is being invoked by an ARM template, which is underneath. So it will be created by the best of practices for a Kubernetes cluster. You can still do all the changes afterwards. Don't worry about those. So I'm going to go with
Mhm.
create new. I'm going to say Unsung DevOps cube. I'm going to land this in Western Europe. And now I can even do some changes here because what do you want to change? I want to change the sizes of the VMs, and it will give me the VM chooser. So here I can say I want to go with, let's say, a DSV2. I'm going to keep that as a standard, but I can choose any kind of VM nodes that I want, just like as you would with another one. So just going to close this quickly. And there's some additional settings that you can set on the cluster, like the Kubernetes version where you want to deploy on, the node count that you want to have, the log analytics location where you want to immediately enable HTTP application. So these are just a standard ARM selection and create criteria that you have when you would do a normal portal Kubernetes creation. Of course, most of the people will do this by CLI, but if you ever did a just an ARM call on the portal, you would actually get the same kind of fields that you're going to fill out. So this actually fills out an ARM template in the back, and we'll make that ready for you. And then you also immediately get the container service along with it. So it will give you an ACR container registry for that matter. You can even choose a kind of SKU that you want to have. Press OK. There you go. Give it a couple of seconds. Voila, there we have it. And if I now do review and create, if all goes well,
Fingers crossed.
always, if all goes well, this will now set up a deployment template. And this will generate me a DevOps Starter resource group and a project underneath my Azure DevOps organization.
Okay.
No resources.
So it
Because
won't create a Kubernetes cluster on your behalf.
not yet. It will create a Kubernetes cluster once the build and the release pipeline has been set
Okay.
up.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that's the
So that's
beauty.
just something I was wondering about if they were just going to create a static cluster, or if you were going to get a cluster using, I suppose, an ARM template in the DevOps project, and you're
Exactly.
getting
It's
it done the
exactly
right
that.
way.
Yeah. So what they're doing is immediately they set you up with a actually infrastructure as code
Yeah.
principles and giving you the reference. So creating this resource, it doesn't take that long. Normally it will almost be finished. So give it a couple of seconds. In the background, it's now creating an additional resource group, as you can see. So it creates a resource group here. It's ready. So if I now go to the resource, what you will see is that it will open up a dashboard showing me where my code is hosted, what build is being invoked to make this thing happen, and what release pipeline.
Okay.
I also immediately have a repository link here. And once this release pipeline is finished, you will see that the Azure resources will be popping up here. So on
Okay.
the right-hand side. So and the cool thing is it also immediately injects something like application insights and stuff. So you immediately also can start monitoring your application. So that's really, really cool.
That's
So
cool.
I'm just gonna make this run, but the cool thing is that you can actually just click through. So this will immediately go to the repository where we're hosting the code. Now this is just a Git repository. You can easily change this because
Mm-hmm.
it will then be reflected also into the Azure DevOps Starter dashboard. We can click through to the build, which is currently going live, or just go to the build definition, as you can see here. So it's now building in an Azure DevOps pipeline. You can immediately start following up, and you can see it is already doing a lot of things. It's building the image for our Kubernetes sample application, the empty one, but you can then easily just inject your own code if you want to. So you have a lot of benefit there. And as you can see in the code itself, it generates some ARM templates, and these will be used to deploy all your services that you're going to need in Azure. So it will be refreshable and renewable every single time you do a deployment.
Okay, that is pretty cool. That's pretty neat. So if you were to check Azure in a couple of minutes, you have a new Kubernetes cluster and a new container registry available.
Exactly. So it will take a couple of minutes. So the build has been processed, as you can see here. So my CI has been finished, and we can just drive in here quickly. If I do this, you will see that it's still a visual build. But for a lot of people, this is an easy segue to understanding how a build process is working, what
Mm-hmm.
you need to create that build process. So here you see you create a container registry, you
Okay.
do a build of the image, you do the push of the image, you do install Helm, you make Helm packaging ready, you copy the ARM templates, and you publish it as an artifact in the door folder.
And
This is how a
then you go
build
through a
works.
release pipeline.
Exactly. And the release pipeline looks something like this. And then you can start playing around with environments and all these things, and you can just add them
Mm-hmm.
in there. That's pretty recent. So the development, the dev stage is now running. You can even add additional stages if you want to. And it's just a simple release pipeline, 7 tasks, which will do then some cluster tagging, deploy the AKS cluster. It will then extract some resource information. Don't know exactly what this does by default. Oh yeah, it gives you um, some keys and some values back, which can then be used inside of kube control for the namespace creation for the secrets. And then yeah, Helm again, and using the Helm charts to deploy your
Okay.
application actually.
That's
And the
actually
cool thing is,
pretty. That's actually pretty neat that you get a full CI/CD pipeline with infrastructure as code just from a starter project. And I assume I can, and I haven't touched with this service before, but I assume that this is mainly as sort of an example or a getting started guide. This is not something you would do for. This is not something you would put in production as is. This needs to be customized to your own environment, I suppose.
yes, of course. I mean, the defaults are maybe a little bit lightweight, although for getting started, like for instance, a stupid static website, this could be easily an additional development process, right, or a development pipeline. Um, but the cool thing is that it will set up other resources which are useful. Yeah, like for instance, here immediately you saw me click the refresh button here. We now have the Azure resources which are being deployed. You will see that it's still creating the Kubernetes cluster, but you also see that there's already an application insights on the log analytics enabled. So we can actually immediately start looking at those resources too. So you can reuse those
Mm-hmm.
and maybe adapt the build so that it becomes more production grade ready, like with additional stages and all these things, and you will then be benefiting from that and just use this dashboard as just a generic overview maybe. But indeed it might be a little bit lightweight to have this as a full-blown production CI/CD system
Oh,
for some systems, specifically for Kubernetes, because Kubernetes is really like, yeah, that's top shelf, and you really need to understand what's going on. Although we have a good standard here of an ARM template, which is clean and nice, and with the ARM charts,
no.
it also comes nice. Cool thing is that if we take a look at all the others that I've already created, because there's so many choices that we have, that I want to demonstrate a couple of them. I created already some additional. Let's say, for instance, this one. This is also a DevOps Starter, just an ASP.NET one. This is based upon a GitHub folder,
Okay.
so a GitHub repository. It asked me to authorize me. So I just do the authorization again. You will see that you will get the latest run. You immediately get a workflow file, which is being generated for actions. You get the repository, of course. And the cool thing is that it will actually show you the latest run with the commits, which on which branch and which push it was, and all the jobs that are being executed inside of the actions files. So if I go inside of the action file, you will actually see that there's a couple of steps in here. As you can see, there's a job
Would you mind zooming in on this a
step.
little, Mike?
Yeah, sure. Give me a second. Here we go. That would be
Yeah, this
more
is better.
readable. So yeah, so here we have some, and as you can see, it already set up some environment variables and things that are easily changeable. You see also all the different steps that are being done here. So here we have some steps in the job build, which does a checkout. You always need that, of course. .NET Core, it's all being set up. So if you take a look at it and the action, you will actually see that these steps are coming back inside of our job. Exactly. So if I re-kick off that build process, or if I change something, this will be fully updatable. So the latest run will be shown, the latest checking will be shown, and so on and so on. That's pretty cool. I can actually do that just by going inside of the code, quickly changing something. So let's say in the application, and I'm just going to go with some core. Can I change here? Let's say just do something really stupid. Just add an additional line just to invoke the change. I'm not going to go into depth into that and just do commit changes directly on the master branch. And you will see that now this will be kicking off immediately and will be reflecting the way it's interacting. So that's really cool. And also the combined features like this one. So this is again an Azure DevOps environment with a GitHub folder. No, this is just a GitHub actions again. It's the other one that I need to take. Sorry, my bad. So as you can see, but if I take this one, for instance, you will see that this is a DevOps pipeline, but actually that's a GitHub, as you can see here.
Oh, okay.
That's a GitHub repository. So if I click on this one, you will actually go inside of the GitHub repository, even though it's a DevOps pipeline.
That
So
is
it
cool. So
knows
you've
it's,
got
yeah,
code in GitHub with an Azure DevOps pipeline to do build and release.
exactly. So basically, people still want to have that choice, and some things are not mature enough in GitHub Actions that you would rather have in DevOps pipelines, or they already invested enough heavily in DevOps pipelines, so they want to have those knowledges. So it has some use. A cool thing is that you also know which environment it has. It creates the endpoint links immediately, and you can go there immediately, and you will see the end result in the app service where it is running now. It's still warming up because I didn't catch it again. And then also the application insights, which is really cool. You get all the classic monitoring and metering out of the box without actually having to set it up yourself. So which is really nice. And then you can just start combining. So you have a lot of these things. If you take a look at the final thing that I'm going to show, because that I really didn't show. If you take a look at the difference in the wizard that you're walking through, where is it again? Here we are. If you take a look again at the wizard when walking through that, you will actually see that the wizard is a little bit different for GitHub Actions. I showed you the one for Azure DevOps Pipelines, but if you're doing this for GitHub Actions and you go, for instance, again for the .NET one, or I can do something else. I mean, let's go for static websites or Java or
Doesn't matter.
Just go for Node. You also get flavors here again, so Express J or a simple Node application. Even these different also have different additional features that you can set up, and like for instance Cosmos DB. And then once you're there, so deploying this, you will actually need to authorize yourself first inside of GitHub, and then you get all the repositories back that you have in GitHub. So here, if I'm doing this now, you will actually see that the organization where you want to land your code in, I can set up a dummy environment. So let's say Unsung demo note. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I set it under the description. It will generate again an Azure website's
No.
URL, and I can start working from it from here out. And you can also set some additional settings here for the resource group where you want to land this container registry again. So these things stay the same, but it's more about on the authentication part and where you can actually select the repositories where you want to go into. So that's a little bit the biggest difference. But this is an easy way to learn also a good to setting up a good actions file for different kind of technologies, for just playing around and learning how DevOps actually works. So, or just to get started and build your way up and build it out from something that you started off with.
Okay. Cool. So, but based on what I've seen, I think this looks to be something really neat if you're new to Azure, new to DevOps, or just want to get a base
Mhm.
CI/CD pipeline going, either GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps based. Based on our discussion from earlier, not something you'd put into production from here to production in one fell swoop, but it does give you infrastructure as code. It gives you the pipelines, and so it's a good way to get started, which is why it's called a DevOps starter, I suppose.
Exactly, exactly. And the cool thing is some of these wizards they took back in other products too. Like for instance, the DevOps deployment plans that we have in app services. Same thing. They reapply there, and you can actually see them from there. I think you can get started there too. So it's not just DevOps starter; it also works from within different other services too. So that's pretty cool. But indeed, I totally agree. It's good to get started. It's good to get a good idea of what's happening behind the scenes, and just to get started with setting these things up and having at least. But what for me the coolest thing is that actually you get a full dashboard on how everything is working together. So if I just go into this one and then click OK, if I just open up one that is already existing, you will get a good overview on what the current state is from just one portal. You don't have to go immediately to your CI/CD system. You have everything in an overview. If this would have failed,
Yeah,
this would be red, and
yeah.
that's pretty decent according to me. So yeah,
That is pretty neat, and thanks for sharing, Mike. I hadn't touched DevOps starters before, and it was really nice to see. And I understand why you call it an unsung hero, because I didn't even know it existed.
a lot of people don't, and again, it's if you're not going to use it for just doing something for real, it's a good segue to get started and learning about DevOps and doing it in a decent way. So yeah, hence why
Cool.
it's one of my unsung heroes.
Cool. And thanks for sharing, Mike. And for everybody who tuned in until this point, thanks for joining us for episode 18 of Unsung Heroes of the Cloud. And we will likely catch you again already next week with our
Yeah,
next guest. Hope to see you then. Bye.
yeah. Bye all. Stay safe.